It's kind of interesting, like invest like a billionaire, because if you're not an accredited investor, you don't have access to certain things.
Access to, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So it's like, I mean, and look,
But even as an accredited investor, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just their strategies are going to be different, right? And I mean, because they're
Right.
in a totally different phase than you are, right?
when I've spoken family office things, what I found was they're big in buying businesses and replicating those businesses. They're big into real estate of certain types and others that they wouldn't touch no matter what. And they're also really collaborative. Like, I've spoke at these events, and like family office gets up and speaks about where their investments are and the new things that they're doing, and they're still raising capital, even though they've got capital to advance what their interests are.
You're listening to the Accredited Investors Only podcast, presented by Accredited Life.
All right, Garrett, welcome to the show. How you feeling today?
You know, doing pretty good, man. Just it's been a productive day. Just sat down with some old friends of mine that are just like really dialed in on media. So it was really cool getting a little bit of insight about what they're up to.
Nice.
And done another podcast. So yeah, man, good. You?
Well, we'll have to come back to that because I'm a media guy at heart. I was a media studies and production major at Temple University, and back in those days did a lot of TV, radio stuff, and I mean, so I love, you know, for me as a real estate guy now, it's like the podcast, doing my own and being on other people. It's like an outlet for that part of me that hasn't died. You know, I still really enjoy it, and it's an important part of this business too, if you're trying to build the brand and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I feel like, you know, when it comes to my books, I really put in taking it pro. Like, it's cool right now while we're doing this. I've got 5 books in the top 100 on wealth management on Amazon as of like the last few weeks. And it's been, you know, been there steadily. My newest one just barely cracked the top 100 in number 98, which is cool, Money on Mass. But, you know, there's like 3 versions of What Would the Rockefellers Do and Killing Sacred Cows on there. So that's kind of cool. And I've like, from a stage standpoint, I've really put in the effort and the time and had the coaches. But when it comes to doing social media, it's been something that I've been kind of like resistant and hesitant with because I've just thought of like, well, who's really on there? And it's a bunch of garbage, but it's like, I might as well put out the best content I possibly can.
Sure.
So those people that can't afford the advice, they can have it, you know, for free. And those that can afford it can get everything circumvented and, you know, collapse a lot of time by just paying for the direct access. So that's been a mindset shift for me in the last little while.
You hit the nail on the head. You know, I think it's a mindset thing. You know, I think so many people don't necessarily want to do it. You know, not that there aren't people out there that just love doing it. It kind of comes natural to them in some way. But I'm like you, where it's just like it's one of those. It's a necessary evil. And you got to get in the right mindset, because there's people out there that just, they don't look at it that way or whatever, you know, so they come across you, they get some great information, and you never know where that's going to take them and take you and that kind of thing. But it's a mindset shift. It's hard to do that.
Well, back in 2003, a long time ago, I had a couple business partners, and one of them, he and I had a radio show 5 days a week, 2 hours a day.
Wow.
And then in 2006, he died in a plane crash. So then
Wow.
I was now doing the show 2 hours a day, kind of on my own 5 days a week. So I started bringing in some guests, and it just got to the point where, like, when, I don't know, it's probably 2012, I was like, I'm just done. I don't want to do this. So here's podcasts coming on the rise at the time that I'm kind of like, we were even live streaming some and gaining popularity. And I even got offered to, you know, a syndicated deal in 33 states. But the problem was, my wife's like, we have little kids. So you think you're going to do a radio show from 5 to 7 instead of 9 to 11? 9 to 11 is no big deal. It's in the workday.
Yeah.
And so I kind of turned it down and then took a break. But now what I look at it is like, I built a YouTube channel up to a certain amount, but I built it with other people's advice. And so now what I'm really clear about is I just like to do like interviews like this. I really enjoy those. But when it comes to my own podcast, I just want to be just me. And I just want to take a topic and drill it down. So I have this money mistakes series I'm doing, 25 episodes. They're anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. I go through 5, 7, or 10 issues of anything from taxes or, you know, investing or real estate or whatever it might be, and just drill down on that. And I even use a little bit of humor, and I even do a segment at the end called "What Would Money Jesus Do?" because I've been introduced to a bunch of events as Money Jesus. So not self-proclaimed, by the way. This is like other people saying this. So, so I just had to find like, what would I dedicate a decade to? What could I see myself doing long term? And I really fell in love with writing after writing 10 books. Like when I wrote the first one, I was scared as hell to write. I was like, man, how's this going to go? And I mean, it went well enough that I spoke to 20 billionaires at a family office event a couple of years ago, and I gave them a book I wrote in my 20s and got good feedback from it with Killing Sacred Cows. So, I think that it's once you fall in love with the process of something, then you can really sustain. But it's really about finding like what your flow is and how you want to do it, not just what everyone else is doing. And I think that it took me a little bit of time to find that.
Yeah, well, it's you make a really good point, and it kind of leads into the question I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure the audience is interested, in what's your story. You know what I mean? Like, so how did you get to this point, to where you're at today? So I'm always curious to hear people introduce themselves in their own words, and how they do it. So we'll start with introduce yourself and kind of keep in mind, what is that story? Where were you, and where are you at today?
Look, man, I'm a fourth generation coal miner's son. So my dad was a coal miner, both my grandfathers, my great grandfather, and I've never stepped foot in a coal mine. My parents were like, no, you're not going to do that. And I grew up in this little coal mining town that I'm very fond of. I mean, at one time I was like, oh, I want to get to a big city and all this, but they always kind of rooted me on. And I feel a lot of connection to that, to that town, because even when I was 15 years old, I started my first business because my dad would bring home the surface vehicle for the coal mine, right? And when the bosses would come to town, I help him clean it. And then he's like, hey, you keep up your grades and you help me do this kind of stuff, I'm going to give you my 75 Chevy pickup truck. How's that for small town life, right? And I was like, I love that truck. Fixed it up a little bit just by cleaning it up, and then started a car detailing business at 15 years old. And I had people that taught me how to create income statements and balance sheets. And I had a teacher that taught me how to like, hey, why don't we make some air fresheners and order like garbage bags for it and floor mats and all this kind of stuff. And my mom worked at the credit union, so I started to, detail the repossessed vehicles there. And then she ended up working for the school district. So I started embedding in there when I was 16 years old, go pick someone's car up before they, right when they got to work, and then drop it right back off to them for lunch or at the end of the day. And I won $5,000 for being the Young Entrepreneur of the Year because I learned how to present, which, dude, I was so nervous when I was 15 presenting my business at this thing called Students in Free Enterprise at a university. Won $500 for third place, which back in that seemed amazing because I think I only had $700 in net income at that time as this part-time business. And then I ended up, climbing the ranks and winning $5,000 for the Young Entrepreneur of the Year. But I thought that was a ton of money as a teenager, man. I'm 17. I'm like, $5,000. I should invest this. But you need a custodian when you're under 18. My mom didn't want to sign off because she thought what I was looking at was a little bit speculative. I'm just asking anyone I knew with money, where should I invest? What stock should I buy? And interestingly enough, by the time I was 19, I was offered an internship by just being curious and inquisitive, and started basically peddling life insurance and mutual funds for a couple years. And then when the market started to dip in 2000, I realized I didn't know anything. And I didn't really want to go tell family and friends like, oh, you're in it for the long haul, or the market's on sale. I want to learn, like, what do the wealthy do? How do they manage their money? And I just leveraged my young age. There was a professor that managed $5 billion in municipal bond funds before he became a professor. He was a number one in every category for municipal bond managers. His name's Stephen Harrop. He became my mentor. He said he wanted to get in shape, so I played racquetball with him. I took him to the gym, and I just asked him tons of questions. And he actually became a client as I was dealing with life insurance. So I was like, hey, man, this is an alternative to a bond portfolio. Bonds, they have capital depreciation risk. You're using muni bonds. Those are tax advantage. You can get tax advantage inside of this cash value policy, no capital depreciation risk, and you got your death benefit, so you can handle any estate taxes, and we can get it out of your estate with an asset protection trust. I was like, excited to tell him about it. He did that. And so that was like, early in my career. And then when the market went down in 2000, that's when I was like, all right, like, I took every single month for 26 straight months, I flew somewhere and just met with people, saw what a family office was for the first time, realized that like there were different rules for the wealthy, and they were really good at saving tax, and they're really good at mitigating risk, and they're really good at like having the right type of asset protection structure, and they're really good at like having a financial team that was working on their behalf. And so I realized more than anything, like I'm going to get in the game of efficiency. Can I save them tax? And can I save them on interest? Can I save them on non-performing fees? Can I save them on, improper design with insurance? And I found like 10% or more could be put back into people's pocket rather than me having speculation and risk. Because unfortunately, when I was young, I started a hard money lending fund, and I was, doing all this bridge financing, and that was great until 2008 when it kicked my ass. And so I was like, look, I'm just going to be the guy that helps people get more guarantees, improve their cash flow, organize their financial house, and, establish real due diligence. And that was kind of the key factor for me.
Wow. Geez, there's a lot to unpack there. My gosh, what would you say the driver was? Was it your family? Like, was it your background, where you grew? Like, was it just internally you had that drive to be doing those things? Because I love the mindset of you used your youth as a strength. You know what I mean? I think so. I started in this business when I was 21. I was right out of college and raising capital for real estate investment funds, and I was really fortunate. I always like to tell the story. It was like one hand I got Rich Dad Poor Dad, which helped with just the mindset shift, because my parents, my mom was a teacher, my dad was a property manager. Like, I didn't come from that strong investment world that some people fortunately do, but a lot of us don't. And then the other hand was Earl Nightingale's Strangest Secret. So it was like that was such a perfect balance of practical, logical, here, do this, but then also the emotional mindset. Kind of, here's how you got to think in order to achieve things. You know what I mean? So what was it for you? I mean, what was that driver?
Well, a couple of things before I answer that. Number one, Strangest Secret, listen to that. I actually bought, when I was in college, I went to a Brian Tracy thing, and he had 10 different Nightingale programs. I bought all 10 of them, listened to them on CD.
I love that old school stuff. It's great, isn't it?
Dude, when in 2008, Nightingale Conant did a program with me called New Rules to Get Rich. And I just remember being super excited because I'd listened to so many Nightingale Conant programs by that time. And I'm walking through the hall, and I'm just seeing all the pictures of all these amazing people that I've listened to their programs. And I'm going to the same studio where they recorded. It was really pretty amazing. It was a really cool moment. And I feel really proud about the program that we put together. On the other side, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, I had read The Millionaire Next Door when I was in college, and I was just reinforced to think that life was about what you could shrink instead of like create, and I was like cutting back, and I was like a total miser. And then I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it was a game changer, just assets creating cash flow, and the thought of like, what wealth is, and creating wealth. And, so that really opened me up. And I think that this is interesting story that I don't know that I've really told before, but like I ended up writing the book, Killing Sacred Cows. And this guy, Brandon, was like, hey, man, I'm being coached by Robert Kiyosaki. I want to give him a copy of your book. So I gave him the book, gives it to Kiyosaki. His team reaches out, say, hey, we'd like one for all of our, team. Can you send 30 copies? I'm like, sure. Nice. I was like, this could be cool. 2 years later, a DVD comes out called Shooting Sacred Cows. It looks almost identical to the OG version, Killing Sacred Cows cover. Wow. And mine was the 9 financial myths, and his was the 8 financial lies. So I was like, well, damn. So I had to send a cease and desist just to protect my IP. Sure. Wasn't like I was trying to get in a battle. Yeah. And my buddy, Mark Anthony, was like, dude, I know the executive team there. Why don't I just connect you? And so I talked to them. I'm like, hey, like, I'd love to meet sometime and just discuss. They're like, well, we're coming to Utah. So we had dinner. It was his executive team, not Robert. And they're like, yeah, we just took your content. I was like, cool. I was like, why don't you just promote me then? Why don't we learn? He's like, great, we'll have you on the podcast. They did 3 promotions. Wow. Those went really well. And then when I did the podcast, I'm walking into Kiyosaki's studio, and there's this thing called the Producer Manifesto. Well, my co-author of Killing Sacred Cows and I wrote the Producer Manifesto. It's like this kind of charge, and it's like a poster. And I was like, I didn't give it to him. He's like, no, man, one of my friends gave it to me, and it was on the wall. I'm like, this is really cool. And I'm like, I'm like enamored because I loved his stuff. And it was kind of interesting because he just interrupted his wife the entire time on the podcast. That was super weird. And then like he was telling me just stuff like how he thinks people are really stupid. And I was like, well, that's why they pay you, is to learn. And then he kept cutting me off. We did this 2-hour interview. We could only grab 45 minutes of footage. And then at the end, his team's like, hey, we should do a book with you guys. I'm like, I'm good. And I wrote Money Unmasked on my own. I mean, so it's one of those things that
You
like,
just knew that was going to be a tough challenge, right? Right.
well, part of it is like, he's kind of in a world now at his later age where it's all about bunkers and guns and
Yeah.
land and,
Silver.
very,
Oh my
very
God.
prepper type. Yeah. And like
Yeah.
silver and gold, I'm not a huge advocate of silver and gold. I mean, like I'm not even a big public markets guy, but the public markets have doubled the return of gold over the last 10 years, basically. Right. And yeah, there's times where we have like 2008 or 2020 where you see gold kind of have a rise, but it also is fairly volatile because there's just so many derivatives that manipulate the price of it overall. So I'm not in full agreement there, but I will cherish what he taught me in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But I don't know if you know the story that Keith Cunningham says that the rich dad was really Keith.
Oh, I think I feel like I've heard that before. Yeah.
And and now that I've seen firsthand shooting sacred cows instead of killing sacred cows, I like Keith. I really dig his stuff. So I'm sure that's what it was. But where did the drive come from was your real question. And the drive came from
a great line of conversation there. I mean, I love that.
Yeah, the real line was like, if I'm candid about it, was when I was in preschool, I had just an incident that made me feel like I was stupid. And I wanted to prove to the world that I wasn't. So I worked hard and really pushed. And
what the hell happened? That must have really stuck with you preschool. What the hell did you do? You colored outside the lines?
So we had this chocolate milk, and you drink your chocolate milk, and then you make it an art project, and you make a little replica of your home. And so I make the replica. I'm super proud of it because the chocolate milk kind of matches the color of my home. It's brown and white, and I'm like, sweet. And then she's like, all right, go home and memorize your address. Once you remember it, then you get your milk carton project back. Well, everyone but me and one other kid got it by Friday. And me and this other kid, he memorized his address and repeated it. And so he got his carton back. And I forgot mine, or like transposed the numbers. I know it now. It's 326 Carson. And they threw it away. It's like that was the rules. And I just felt, man, I'm stupid. And it just created this drive in me that at first was really helpful. Eventually it was kind of limiting, but just feeling like I was stupid. And so I wanted to prove that I wasn't stupid. And I thought if I become, at the time in my little mind, if I become rich, then that'll prove that I'm not stupid. And so, I had a lot of motivation that way.
I would ask when you realized that was not a prerequisite for being rich, because I think that's one thing. A lot of people think you got to be really smart, but people that work in the industry know people. It's not all about book smarts, right? It's
collaboration. It's people.
Right? Collaboration.
It's communication. It's financial intelligence. It's stuff a lot of times you don't learn in school.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. And it wasn't until later on in my life, maybe like 22 years old, 23 years old, I recalled the incident of the milk carton and realized that I had pegged myself as being
set
stupid.
you on the path. Yeah.
And I was like, and then once I was free of that, I was able to enjoy it a lot more. I wasn't just chasing it.
Sure. Wow, that's amazing. Man, I talk a lot about foundation, and people understanding where they come from. I think that's such an important thing for clarity, to bring clarity and focus. And if you want to make changes to your life and to your mindset and things like that, I think sometimes it's important to take the time to realize maybe where those things came from. And that is a perfect example of a foundation and something that happened very early on, probably one of your earliest memories, and how you've used it to, kind of create drive in certain ways. And then to that point, it sounds like it took you so far, and then you had to evolve that as well. Because it seems like
because there's certain limitations when you feel like you're stupid and you're trying to prove to everyone you're smart. Where I might not ask questions, or I might not speak up, or I might not take chances. When I say take chances, I mean just like, dude, I did comedy. That's a chance, right? I got up on stage and did an open mic. That takes some that's tough. When I was 15, I did that first speech to win that third place in the business competition. Like sometimes it's overly stressful if it's like trying to control the environment too much and not having some freedom. So it's nice to have recognized the milk carton incident to heal from it. But yeah, man, I have an earlier memory than that was just as impactful. When I was 3, I got hit by a car.
Wow.
And man, that was like, dude, that was rough. And
3, my God.
My mom was pregnant with my little sister, and she watched it happen. And then we had to get a police escort to the hospital, which was 30 miles away. And I'm bleeding everywhere. And then, they're giving me stitches. And then all of a sudden my dad shows up in his coal mining outfit with dust on his face. My grandparents show up worried. And I'm like, oh, damn, if I'm not perfect, I hurt my family. So I'm trying not to be stupid and I'm trying to be perfect. That is a torturous thing, to have those two things.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. Wow. Well, that's amazing. For somebody that couldn't remember your address at that time, well, years later, you can remember things much further back than something like that. That's funny.
Yeah, man, it's amazing what happens when you do a lot of writing. You get a lot of
Sure.
clarity,
Well, you know what? That's a great segue into one of the questions I want to ask you. Where did that come from? Where did the motivation to write was your first book Killing Sacred Cows or?
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, the motivation, okay, so first off, the first motivation was, oh, it would be so cool to be an author. Like it was all ego. And so for 2 years, all I got was 72 pages done with a terrible title because it was all about me. It wasn't really about the reader. It was like, like this will be amazing if I get this book out there.
Mm.
And then what happened was we just got together as a firm. There was 42 of us at the time. We had 3 offices and we had this consultant. He's like, what's a game that you guys could play together? What's something that would be of value in the world that you guys could all get behind? And we decided, let's do a book. And so Les, my business partner that died in the plane crash, and I were going to write this book together. And so we blocked out a bunch of time in June and we rented a hotel that we were going to go like write. And it was, beautiful spot. And he died 2 weeks before that. So that delayed things for 4 months because I was just trying to keep things together. And like it was tough. I just, there's my whole team's grieving. I don't really know how to counsel them. I'm in my 20s at the time. I'm just
business was this for? Was this insurance or was this something else? Or
so we had a company called Ingenuity, and we had a couple tiers. One is we created something called the Producer Revolution, which was it was like a membership, and inside that membership, you could attend events once a month. You got a CD back in the days of CDs. Every month we called the producer interviews. We had a daily little like quote that would go out 5 days a week, and then we had a physical newsletter that would go out. So it was kind of like a mindset training program for prosperity. And then we also did sell insurance back then, and we were really good at selling the insurance. We didn't do any assets under management, but we also hosted these, curriculum for wealth events, which were 2-3 day events for $7,500, and then that got the consulting that went with it. So we were building that up. Started as insurance, and then was more comprehensive financial services.
Wow.
But what we discovered in that process was there were just people that were doing really well but didn't feel like they were doing well. There's people that like had money but they didn't feel wealthy, and that's why we started the monthly membership. It was like $20-$30 a month. Before there was like WordPress or before there was Kajabi or any of these easy platforms, we had to just build it. And then, it was really cool because it created a movement where we were just having 30 different events happening on a certain night of the month, all over the state of Utah and into Nevada. So that was really kind of exciting. And there's a lot of momentum, but obviously when they died, it just was a little bit too much to handle and couldn't quite keep all the momentum going.
Yeah, that's amazing. What was it? It seems like you learned very early on that a good way to generate leads for your kind of the sale, business and the consulting and things like that was creating a lot of content and adding a lot of value. Where did that come from? Did you have a business partner that introduced you to that? Or, I think that's one of those kind of revelations that people need to understand in marketing and sales, that you got to try to add as much value, and build a relationship that way than just selling all the time.
So what happened was when my partners died, you got to think we had 4 big personalities and 2 of the 4 were now gone. We had a radio show that was 5 days a week at the time. We had, we were hosting events all the time. We were starting to do writing. We had newsletters and stuff like that. But, we hadn't really figured out marketing. We just had built kind of a movement just because we were excited and we were young and it was like catching on. And part of it was kind of, some of it was shallow, to be honest. Like some of it was, we just had really nice, fancy ass cars that people were like, oh, look at these kids driving these. Some people just thought we were crazy, and we kind of were. We even had part
that
of
was like social media in real life.
Yeah, we were. I remember I posted a picture of me and my Bentley on the Salt Flats, and someone was like, "What a douchebag!" And I was like, "Ah, this feels good." Yeah. But we also had like a plane, and that's the one that crashed. So we were kind of like trying to demonstrate, hey, we're living the life that we love. We're having fun doing what we're doing, and we'd love to teach you and bring you along for the ride. And so that was the process. Well, when my partners died, I got a call from Dan Sullivan and Bab Smith from Strategic Coach, and they were just like, "What can we do to help you?" And I was like, "I don't know, but be good to maybe come get a producer interview and just get a little bit of time. And they're like, all right, come to Toronto. And I stayed in their guest house. And on that dinner that we had at their house, I said, I'm going to need to get better at marketing. And they're like, you know what? You just need to get to know Joe Polish. So I bought Piranha Marketing, which was a program, this is in 2008. I listened to it, and, taught like creating these awareness guides. And so I wrote a bunch of awareness guides, which ended up getting me a lot of media spots. And then it was kind of some of the precursor to, when I was launching my book at the time, and they introduced me to Joe. And so he had a program called Genius Network. And so I really learned to market from Genius Network back in 2008, 2009. There's some really brilliant marketers, and that helped me to sell books, and that helped me to learn how to move books. And, I've gotten better over time just by having really good people around me that are even better at marketing. I love to focus on the content. I love to focus on the value to the customer, and I like them to get the message out there. And so they're really good at that. And it's a good kind of team effort. But yeah, it's, for a long time, I just went on people's stages, even like this, doing a podcast, and that helps a little bit. But what helped a lot is when we could just run ads and sell books from running ads. And we've sold hundreds of thousands of copies of books by being able to run ads.
Wow. That's amazing. What would you say, like, from those days and meeting Joe, who I don't know. I feel like I've heard that name before, but I don't know what his.
Yeah, he's got an I Love Marketing podcast. He's got, Genius Network. Joe's philosophy, he wrote an amazing book called What's in It for Them. I highly recommend it to anyone. It's just, I endorsed it. I read it when it was in manuscript form, and it's a really good equation of how to build amazing relationships. And Joe's just done that. He's a really good connector, and he knows a ton about marketing, but he also knows a ton of people that know a lot about marketing. So he does a good job of like exposing you to other thinkers and other people, and not just him, but he also has a depth of knowledge there. And he's always just goofing around too. We've become good friends over the years.
Gotcha. And that sounds like something that you were doing a lot of as well, from a comment you made earlier through your YouTube channel and all, that you were sharing a lot of information from other people. Is that correct? And is that kind of part of how you would create content, is to look at, maybe how have you been able to use what other people do, or that kind of thing, to create content and to, just create value, that kind of,
I mean, I like to, like, when I wrote Killing Sacred Cows, I was like, what are the things that most people believe that aren't true? And I just wrote every cliche I could think of, and I wrote every idea I could think of. And then when I wrote Money Unmasked, I was just like, what is it what would it take to have people heal their relationship to money? And what's a money persona, and why hasn't someone written about it before? And so that one took a lot of research and, and everything. And so I'm sure that I learned from other people, but a lot of times I learn from the questions my clients ask me and coming up with answers. And there's like almost like a co-creation process, or sitting down and thinking about problems and thinking of the solutions and picking things apart. Like, when I went to a family office for the first time, I saw that they were doing things differently. And I was like, all right, well, how could I apply this to entrepreneurs that are not at that level yet, or that may never be at that level, because there's not a lot of people giving advice to them. And so very naively, I thought, oh yeah, I'll build I called it the accredited network. I built something called the accredited network, which is essentially these people that we validated that they agreed with our philosophy, that had a depth of expertise in their area. And so they would help supplement and implement anything. So we're talking at 30,000 foot view, they could bring it the nuts and bolts to get it done. And so that was just a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Now I understand why it's the uber wealthy that have access to these people, because it just is hard to find that caliber of person that's willing to collaborate with others and get it in a cohesive manner. And, so it's just, the content comes from a lot of different places. A lot of it's just life experience. Like if you read my blog is this, personal experience, or like something that happens with someone I'm consulting, and I'm like, man, I could write about that to really help them through that. So I try to make that as unique as possible by sharing stories, asking a lot of questions. And then there's just certain things that we all kind of agree are principles. So whether I talk to 1,000 wealthy people, we're all going to mainly agree on that. The nuance is just how to implement that in a strategy form, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's the classic, if this person's asking you, chances are somebody else has the same exact question. So I think that's a great way to look at it. What would you say, like, kind of pivoting to, from an advice perspective, right now, and all the things that you've learned, what would you say some of those greatest misconceptions are, and how can people work towards changing them, all that kind of stuff.
I think in Killing Sacred Cows, there's 3 of the 9 myths that are the most important to know about and think of. Number 1 is the first chapter is the finite pie. Like there's a lot of people that think that the world's a zero-sum game, that I win at the expense of another, and so it's competitive instead of collaborative, and they don't understand velocity and exchange. It's exchange that creates wealth, and velocity is a dollar gets to continue to exchange through service, goods, experiences over and over again, and the more times it circulates, the more wealth is created. So when people get into a mindset of scarcity, scarcity is the greatest destroyer of wealth. No amount of luck or discipline or rate of return or, even advisor is going to help someone that's stuck in scarcity. And like, here's a perfect example of someone in scarcity. Oh, they're a billionaire. They did something wrong. And I'm like, that's scarce. Like if someone's a billionaire, 9 times out of 10, it's because they added massive value and the profit is evidence of the value creation. And so when they're like, oh, we didn't tax them high enough, I'm like, so what you think we should do is take someone that's very effective with capital and take the capital away to give it to someone else who's not as effective with it.
Sure. Yeah.
Because they think, again, it's a finite pie.
Yeah.
And wealth is created through unequal exchange. Like if you buy something from me, like one of my books, I'm telling you that whatever you pay for the book, the book is worth less to me than what you paid for it. And you're telling me that what you paid for it's worth more than what you paid for it, because we don't do equal exchange. We don't trade a dollar for a dollar, which means we could both end up wealthier because of expertise and really this diversity that happens with skill sets. So that chapter is instrumental, because if someone can't get beyond zero-sum game, then what they do is they hold on to what they've got or take what they can, and it corrupts their mind, and they're not the value creators they could be, and it slows down their overall wealth process, because no one shrinks away to wealth, and they usually move to more reduction than production. The second chapter in that's really instrumental is the self-insurance chapter. So there's no real such thing as self-insurance. There's either insured or not insured, and there are things not to insure. Like if I can pay for something today and go to sleep easy tonight, I probably shouldn't insure it, because there's still peace of mind. But if I don't have something insured and it infringes upon my peace of mind, or it could derail or devastate my legacy or my finances, I want to insure the catastrophic, not the inconsequential. Catastrophic is detrimental. Inconsequential can be handled. So inconsequential is different for different people, right? An accredited investor, it might be that, hey, they can have ridiculously high deductibles or long time periods before insurance kicks in because of the capital that they have. So that self-insurance chapter is the cheapest way to insure is to get companies that are worth, hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion, and pay pennies on the dollar rather than using your own capital, which means you spend at least $1 for that dollar of insurance. So it's actually an efficiency play. And then the last thing I would say that's really revolutionary in that book is wrote a chapter called Avoid Debt Like the Plague. Now, people out there in the middle class, guru world would say that you should never borrow. Well, that's ridiculous, because if we look at every major company, they're issuing bonds. That's borrowing.
Sure.
And by the way, companies are made up of people. So and like some of these people even say, oh, you just put your money in a mutual fund, it gets 10 to 12% a year, which I don't believe is really the accurate return. But then they're telling you to pay off something that is only costing you 6%. So you're actually slowing down that process by paying extra to the bank versus paying extra to your funds, if that's the true return. So Avoid Debt Like the Plague says assets minus liabilities is either equity or debt. It's equity if it's worth more, and assets and liabilities, it's debt if it's more liability than asset. So avoid debt and having more liabilities than assets, but that doesn't mean avoid borrowing. If you can be a steward over the money and it's attached to an asset that creates more cash flow, has more value, you may consider borrowing, simply because we've had high inflation and that makes those loans less expensive over time, and because you can deploy that capital in a way that gives you access to leverage. Now, a lot of people should never leverage because they don't know how. They don't have liquidity. They don't have expertise in cash flow management. They don't have financial intelligence. And so they get over leveraged, and then they blame borrowing as the reason that they're broke.
Sure.
But the reality is people that are broke from borrowing are borrowing to consume instead of borrowing to produce. And so those are 3 really important things in Killing Sacred Cows that I think are really useful. And look, I gave that book to 23 billionaires when I spoke to them a few years ago, and one of them completely revolutionized how they handle their money. So I was in my 20s and I felt like it was a gift that I could write about that topic, and it still holds strong today. That book's still in the top of retirement planning, top of wealth management. Here we are, we're 15 years later.
Yeah. Wow. That's unbelievable. Really amazing. And where did you said, when you wrote that book, you were doing a lot of interviews with other people. Where the heck where did you gain that knowledge to be able to put that out there, especially at that time of your life?
Well, I learned really early from Steve Harrop, right? That
You
hey,
said that,
just
yeah.
asking, I could get questions answered, and I could, add value to him by being his racquetball partner or his gym partner because he wanted to be in shape. And
Yeah.
then that taught me really early because I also went to this thing called Governor's Honors Academy as a teenager. And I was able to interview Ren Zafiropoulos, who was the creator of Xerox, and learn about, and that was fascinating. And then people that were big, donors to the university would come and speak at that, or senators, or, entrepreneurs. And I just would go ask questions so I could learn more. And so I figured out pretty early, hey, I could pretty much have a meeting with almost anyone as a 19 or 20-year-old because they like to pay it forward, but most people don't ask. And I had a little red memo pad, and I went and asked the questions, and I was just super inquisitive and curious because I wanted to learn. And my initial thought was, I want to make more by my investments than the advice that I give. And so I got spread a little bit thin. I did 2 IPOs. I bought into oil and gas. I didn't know. I mean, oil and gas is complicated when you look at like flow and digging and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And plus I was like, oh, it's a tax advantage. And I had over 100 real estate properties at one time. And, I can't remember if I said I started a hard money lending fund. I had a PPM. It was too much. And by trying to manage all that, it took me away from where my real gifts were. And it actually hurt the growth of my business. So what I learned is to simplify. And we only diversify when we look to preserve wealth, not when we look to grow wealth. Diversification is more a preservation tool, which is great for really wealthy people, not so good for someone starting out. I believe everybody has an investor DNA, which is your values. It's a script for how to operate. It's your competencies. Where do you have ability, insight, and knowledge? And it's your drivers. Where do you want to pay attention and learn? And when we invest in alignment with that, what we find out is we become better investors.
Yeah.
And the people that are really successful investors, it's because they learn to invest. And the people that are mediocre, it's because they hand their money over without understanding due diligence, mitigating risk, creating cash flow, having exit strategies, or even tax efficiency for that matter.
Yeah.
And that's problematic,
Wow. You bring up a really good question, and it's one of those. I was going to ask you, what do you think the biggest differences are between what the family offices, and the truly wealthy individuals and families, what they do, versus what other people do on the other end of the scale. But it's also, I see a lot of times like podcasts and books and things like that, where it's written like, to invest like a billionaire or invest like a multimillionaire or something like that. I always think to myself, how they invest, where they're at and their level is probably completely different to how you should be investing if you want to get to that level. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, if you'd agree with that statement, and then kind of from there, what could people be doing? Because I completely agree with you on the education side, but I think it's hard to like, where do you get started? I mean, what resources would you recommend? All that kind of stuff.
It's kind of interesting, like invest like a billionaire, because if you're not an accredited investor, you don't have access to certain things.
Access to, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, and look,
but even as an accredited investor, it's just their strategies are going to be different, right? And I mean, because they're in a totally different phase than you are, right?
When I've spoken family office things, what I found was they're big in buying businesses and replicating those businesses. They're big into real estate of certain types and others that they wouldn't touch no matter what. And they're also really collaborative. Like, I've spoke at these events, and like family office gets up and speaks about where their investments are and the new things that they're doing, and they're still raising capital, even though they've got capital to advance what their interests are. Sure. And so that was super fascinating. Like, I sat next to one guy, and they just own tons of gas stations all over the United States, but the way that they build them where they're much bigger. So when you walk in, there's higher ceilings, they're cleaner, and like, so they're selling a lot inside of the store where the real profit is made, because they make it so inviting. And it's like, but it's really cool because they just keep buying more and more and more. And it's like they understand that model, and that's really focused. It's not the only asset they have, but it's not like they're going, we need to diversify into things we know nothing about. No, they're like, we really understand this. And this is going to be one part of the basket we're going to watch like a hawk, but it's probably good to have other asset classes, but we're not just going to go diversify into things we know nothing about, you know? And I think that that's where the majority of the population just automatically puts their money one-dimensionally in some retirement plan. They are in some ETF or mutual fund. Unfortunately, a lot of them are in like really ridiculously high fee mutual funds that, that are killing their performance because index funds beat them over a 20-year period of time. But if we look at accredited investors, they're doing better than the indexes because they can do private capital deals, and those private capital deals might double what the public markets do. But the problem is the average investor getting into a syndication, they might be with a firm that's doing their first one and they haven't hit a bad economy and they don't have a ton of capital. And it's not just the financial capital, it's the relationship capital. There's just certain people that have such good knowledge about, okay, if the market does this, here's 3 other ways that we could slice this deal and how we can sustain and what we're going to do, or we're going to make sure that it's all investor money and we're not borrowing from the bank or whatever it is. They got a number of factors, or they have people that really need tax advantages and there's things that they could do to give them that as a limited partner. I mean, there's just, it's interesting to say, oh, invest like a billionaire. Well, guess what? Almost every billionaire, they have a family office, and that's going to be pretty tough for someone that's making less
to replicate as
$300 million, right? And the second thing is, like, risk is in the investor, not the investment. So it's like, if you don't have time to become a good investor, because most people that are, billionaires, they're spending so much time being investors, and it's like, if we just look at like Warren Buffett is not a public stock market investor. He just has enough money that he buys companies that are public. That's completely different than buying a mutual fund, right? So they implement their methodology. He has certain control mechanisms and things they immediately do to make that stock go up in value. And, so it's like, you have to have methodologies, business rules, investing knowledge, and a team. And I think that's really critical. And you have to have deal flow. Family offices have tons of deal flow. So just because someone invests in real estate, not all real estate's created equal. And if you don't see a lot of deals and you don't have parameters, I just know people that are so strict with their parameters, they'll walk away. Like, I have a client that has a beautiful model where they go in and they buy restaurants, but these are like easy to manage restaurants, like a pancake house or a diner. And it's ones that it's aging owners that really weren't business owners, but they end up with really nice property by the beach or downtown area. And they're real estate investors that end up acquiring the business, but they own the real estate. And then they actually improve labor costs and they make sure there's management in there. And I mean, they've just produced extraordinary returns. And there's a minimum profit of $650,000, otherwise they won't take it per year. And they see deals that are under that 650 that meet all of the parameters they say no to, because they know how much time it takes to fly to see that place or to make sure the management structure. And so I think that the average investor doesn't have any investment rules. They think just because they have money and someone comes across and offers something, that's what they should do. They're over-reliant upon the public markets with the neglect of cash flow, with no understanding of exit strategies or mitigating risks. So it's hard to say invest like a billionaire. It's just that's a catchy title. It's a little harder to do.
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head there, and that's kind of a lot of the problem, I feel like, with social media. And like to circle back around to that conversation, I think so many times people have to come up with titles and things like that to grab attention, and it just doesn't do justice to what really goes into making decisions at the end of the day. How would you say, how can people kind of sort through that, and how can they start to move towards making more clearer decisions, and just really coming up with their buy box in a sense? I mean, because like I think you were just saying, a lot of people just don't have that methodology down to here's what I'm going to do. I mean, they're kind of just going by the seat of their pants, or referral, or something that looked good online, or they liked the way the guy posted stuff, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, for people that are not accredited investors, I created a program called Multiplier. I teach every week either on make more money, keep more of the money you make, which I use a 4I methodology: IRS, interest, investments, and insurance. Plug those 4 leaks. The third I is become a better investor, right? Grow your money. And the fourth one is grow yourself. And so for those entrepreneurs and investors that are on the way up, I'm giving them weekly education. I'm giving them full access and support with great tools to help them grow. If they're already an accredited investor, like I speak almost at every lifestyle investor event, that's for accredited investors, It's $55,000 to be in it, and you see deal flow and you meet a bunch of really cool people. So for the people that have already kind of made it, they might go to there, or they might just hire me one-on-one, and I go through and comb through and build out the missing pieces of their team. Like those are the kind of things that are helpful. I mean, to me, if you're searching for investments by watching YouTube, like it's a problem because
Yeah, or
it's good, like,
podcast. I mean, my God.
right.
Yeah.
It's because it's, too many people are looking for a hack. Too many people are looking for a tactic
Sure.
instead of looking to grow their own knowledge and becoming a better investor. That's the game, building the team. And so, yeah, I think that there's books that are super helpful. I think there's events that are super helpful. And I think that there's videos that are a catalyst to get you started. But, to truly become a better investor, you find a mentor in that world that you're like, they're dialed in. You shadow and learn from them, and then you start making allocations over time that are manageable before you go all in, and then you learn from experience. That's really key.
Yeah, that's gold. So what's in the pipeline? You got any books in the that you're working on now? I mean, what's kind of the message moving forward? Is it, it seems like you have a very good idea of what it is that you're doing, great vision and all. Is it changing at all? I mean, any changes coming up? Because that's the thing too with investing. It's always evolving, right? In a lot of ways. And I've been doing this for 10 years now, and it's just, I look back, I can't believe how much things have evolved over time, so I'm curious to what you have, what's in the background, what are you working on, and what are you excited for moving forward?
Yeah, a couple things. So I do have a book that's the manuscript is done, and it's a shorter book. It's 20,000 words. My latest book was like 41 or 44,000 words.
Wow.
So it's a little bit shorter, but it's using humor to teach finance. And the goal is to make this a book that parents give to their kids when they're in high school or in college, because it's funny. They could just put it in their bathroom or on their coffee table and just read it a little bit at a time, because I think if we use humor, it makes it more accessible, but there's still reality there, especially, not getting into consumer debt and that kind of stuff. So I've had a few people read it, had really good feedback, and I've got an amazing editor on it. But it's just that Money on Mass is where I'm putting a lot of attention. It took me 7 years to write that book, and it's not that old. So I got to get that out there in a bigger way. I just rewrote What Would the Rockefellers Do? It got revised and updated at the end of 2024, and I rewrote Killing Sacred Cows to make it more about investor DNA. So I kind of gave those a facelift and a little bit, like, made it a little bit more reader-centric, made it a little bit shorter. I'm a better writer now, so I just kind of improved it. And I'm now selling those 3 books together in this Rich Life bundle, and it comes with 2 courses. And, so I think it's like GarrettGunderson.com/Rich Life, but that to me, that's the financial intelligence package. Like, if people read those 3 books, they know the pieces about legacy, they know the pieces about plugging financial leaks, they know the pieces about money persona, and they know the financial myths that they can avoid so that they don't end up, losing their wealth or limiting their wealth. And so that's really where I'm putting my focus. I want to get 100 people to engage in those books every day, so that we can really start making a dent in this whole financial world, because I just think that there are good financial books out there. The best ones are really dry and hard to read. Like, I read one book called Opportunity Cost in Finance and Accounting, definitely written by some professor, like, learned a ton, but like, that's not going to be a book that everybody buys.
No.
But a lot of the financial books out there are really written to keep people middle class, and it's not really the rules of the rich. And so I feel like my books are important to get out there because it resonates with the people that are already wealthy, and be like, this articulates what I've already known, but now I have the words to put to it. Sure. For the people who aren't, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't see that. I didn't understand that. I have my multiplier group that I teach that I mentioned. I've got, speeches that I'm doing on a regular basis. I'm licensing my content to other financial people so they could leverage the content that I've created, because they're always one-on-one with clients, and I'm doing the one-to-many things like this. So I'm just looking to collaborate to get more of the word out. I mean, my goal is I want to liberate 1 million people to become financially independent. When people are financially independent and have recurring revenue to cover their expenses, they can swing for the fences in their vision. And if they're an entrepreneur, guess what? Athletes, when they age, they can't play anymore.
Mhm.
But entrepreneurs, when they age, they have more wisdom. So I wanted them to design a life they don't want to retire from and be financially independent as soon as possible, so they have more stability in their marriage. They could be more focused on, swinging for the fences and what they're up to. And I'm doing some one-on-one consulting because, like, I enjoy the one-on-one nature. I just
Mm.
do like a full day with people, build out
Sure.
their financial team, and instead of like having it over time, because I could get a ton done in a day, more than most people can get done in it, if they meet over time in a year. So
Mm.
we just kind of accelerate the results.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love the fact that you're doing things for the next generations as well, because I think that's one thing that comes up so many times is it's one thing to have the drive and the vision and the determination and the knowledge yourself. And a lot of times I think accredited investors, high net worth investors, they have a hard time passing it along. So they're building this, portfolio, they're building businesses, but I feel like was one of those things that's a lot more difficult to translate that to the next generations,
Well,
and also to be able to have, information that they can then share, and especially in a fun way. Yeah, I mean, that's amazing.
yeah, they could buy my children's book. I got a children's book called I Am Money,
Oh wow,
and
nice.
it's really good for like kindergartner through third grade. I wrote it with Julia Cook. She sold over 4 million copies of children's books. She speaks kid, and
Mm.
so I think it's important. The teenage and college will be the next book. The children, like, man, imagine if you learned about money when you're 5 years old,
Mm.
and money's the character in the book, and the message is you're your greatest asset, and invest in yourself and grow
Mm.
your skills, and and it's more abundant. I think that that's where we can get to people before they're already beaten down by,
Yeah,
bad advice, because
exactly.
the
Yeah.
majority of advice for the middle and upper middle class is really limiting.
Wow, 100%. I mean, I have a niece now. She's turning 2 in February, and I can't wait to get her onto that stuff because that's not how I was raised at all. And exactly, if you could fight against some of those, core foundational limiting beliefs sooner than later, that's just, yeah. Where can you go from that? I mean, it's amazing. So.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this is a great conversation. So much to unpack here. I can't wait to re-listen to it. Dropped a lot of golden nuggets in there, and you mentioned some places that people could go to learn more about you and
Yeah.
access different resources. But I'll just ask now. If people want to find out more about you, get involved, how can they do that?
Yeah, GarrettGunderson.com. Like, you scroll down barely, you could jump into my newsletter. I send it out once a week. And it's, I take a lot of time to write the feature article, blog in it. And sometimes we try to sell books. We're not selling anything big on there. We're just trying to get people armed with the right education, give them plenty of value and content. So that's a great thing. And for those that are on social media, you can Garrett B. Gunderson, and Instagram. I'm doing daily drops of financial gold. I think it'd be amazing if you've got people that are on your team that you want to kind of elevate and understand more prosperity thinking, because you're already an accredited investor. I think that's a great place to go. And then they go to YouTube. I have a YouTube channel as well. I drop 3 longer videos. I'm doing a money mistake series right now, 25 videos on anything from the top 10 tax mistakes or the top 10 investing mistakes, or that kind of stuff. So
Wow.
I think it's really helpful, and I use a little humor in it, and that kind of stuff too.
Awesome. Well, lots of great places to find you there. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you being here, Garrett.
Hey, thanks, man.
Thank you.